Someone laughs after you share an idea. The room changes. You feel it immediately. Your mind starts searching for a way to recover. You explain more. You soften your words. You try to make them see you differently. But that moment reveals something most people never notice. The person who needs approval the most is often the person with the least control. You think approval gives you respect. You think being understood makes you powerful. But the opposite is often true. The moment your confidence depends on someone else's reaction, they gain influence over your emotions, your decisions, and eventually your identity. Real strength is not being accepted by everyone. Real strength is remaining yourself when acceptance disappears. Most people think approval is just wanting to be liked. It isn't. Approval is a silent contract. You give other people permission to decide whether you are enough, and they give you temporary moments of acceptance in return. But there is a hidden cost, because once someone else controls your sense of worth, they don't need to control your actions. They only need to control your emotions. And by the end of this video, you will understand why breaking that contract changes the way people respond to you forever. In this video, you will discover 5 Stoic behaviors that transform you from someone who is shaped by opinions into someone who is guided by principles. The first behaviors will teach you how to recognize the trap. The final behavior will reveal why the person who no longer needs approval becomes the hardest person to manipulate. Because freedom begins when other people's reactions stop deciding who you are. The first behavior, the person who recognizes the approval trap before it controls them. Most people don't realize they are chasing approval because it rarely feels like weakness. It feels like being thoughtful. It feels like being respectful. It feels like wanting connection. But underneath many of these choices is the same hidden question: what will they think of me? That question quietly controls more decisions than most people realize. It changes what you say, what you post, what risks you take, and sometimes what version of yourself you allow people to see. Imagine writing something online. You have an opinion. You believe in what you said. But before posting, you edit it. You remove parts of yourself. Not because the message changed, because the fear of judgment became stronger than your own conviction. The Stoic asks a different question: is this aligned with who I want to become? That question moves your life from reaction to direction, because the first step to becoming impossible to control is noticing what has been controlling you. Second behavior, the person who stops begging to be understood. Most people believe explaining themselves creates respect, so whenever someone misunderstands them, they enter a battle. They write long messages. They defend every choice. They try to repair every opinion. But what they don't realize is that every unnecessary explanation sends a hidden message. Your approval determines whether I can be at peace. And that is the moment control changes hands. Imagine someone criticizes a decision you made. The old version of you reacts immediately. You need them to understand. You need them to admit you were right. But the stronger version pauses and asks, does this person actually have the authority to define my character? If the answer is no, silence becomes a form of strength. Not because you have nothing to say, because you understand something most people never learn. You cannot build a powerful identity while constantly asking others for permission to have one. Behavior number 3, the person who uses discomfort as training. Most people think rejection is something to avoid, but the Stoics viewed discomfort differently. They saw it as training, because every time you avoid judgment, you teach your mind one dangerous lesson. Other people's opinions are stronger than my own values. Think about a leash. Most people imagine a leash only limits movement when someone pulls it, but the strongest leash is the one you never test. You don't know how far you can go, because you have already accepted the limit. Imagine speaking during a meeting. You share an idea. Someone disagrees. The old version of you feels exposed. The stronger version notices something different. You survived. Your identity remained intact. The fear was never proof that you were weak. The fear was evidence that you were standing at the edge of growth. Every time you choose courage over approval, the leash becomes weaker. The fourth behavior, the person who stops protecting their image and starts building their character. This is where most people lose, because they don't actually want approval. They want control over how they are perceived. And that is impossible. An image is a version of you created inside someone else's mind. You can influence it, but you can never own it. Character is different. Character is who you remain when nobody agrees, nobody praises you, and nobody is watching. Imagine making a decision that is right for your future, but people around you don't understand it. The old version of you starts defending the image. You explain, you justify, you look for reassurance. The stronger version recognizes the deeper truth. Sometimes the price of becoming yourself is being misunderstood by people who only knew the version of you that needed their approval. Some people may judge you, some people may leave, but losing people who only accepted your performance creates space for people who respect your reality. Your image belongs to the crowd. Your character belongs to you. The fifth behavior, the person who chooses principles over popularity. Most people think the final battle is against other people's opinions. It isn't. The final battle is against the part of yourself that still wants to be accepted at any cost. Because approval can become a quiet form of self-betrayal. You laugh at things you don't respect. You stay where you don't belong. You abandon your standards because being accepted feels safer than standing alone. But every time you trade your principles for approval, you teach yourself that your identity has a price. Imagine everyone expects you to choose the easier path, the path that keeps everyone comfortable, the path that prevents criticism. But you choose the path that keeps you aligned with your values. Some people will disagree, some people will never understand, but for the first time, your peace does not depend on their reaction. That is the moment you stop following the room and start leading yourself. Remember that moment at the beginning? Someone laughs, the room changes, everyone waits to see what you do next. The old version of you needed to recover. You needed to explain. You needed to convince people that you were still worthy of respect. But the new version understands something deeper. The person who needs everyone to approve of them is always negotiating their identity. They are constantly asking, am I enough? Do they accept me? Do they understand me? But the person who has mastered themselves asks a different question. Am I living according to what I believe is right? That is the difference between a person controlled by the world and a person who can move through the world without being controlled by it. Because praise cannot own you. Criticism cannot break you. Rejection cannot redirect you. Not because you stopped caring about people, because you stopped abandoning yourself to keep them. That is why the person who no longer needs approval becomes dangerous. Not dangerous because they control others. Dangerous because they cannot be controlled. And the hardest person to defeat is the person who has already mastered themselves. Which behavior are you working on mastering right now? Learning to stop explaining yourself, controlling your reactions, or becoming less dependent on approval? Share it below, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to reinforce the person you are choosing to become.